out that country feeling, you know what I mean. Every time
Hi, I'm Bonnie. It takes a village. We're here today with Rich Appelbaulm. We're finding out what's in Santa Barbara, who's in Santa Barbara, what are our resources, what's needed in Santa Barbara. I get to ask Rich some questions. So, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Bonnie.
Oh,
and I
good,
get to answer the questions.
Yes, I'm so delighted to be able to come see you, speak to you. I know that you've been in the Independent lately. You've been kind of a topic of news, and I must say, well deserved.
Well, thank you. I retired after 42 years at UCSB, and so the Independent, Nick Welsh, decided to do a little profile on me, which they put in the Independent as well as on the website. So don't believe everything you read, but it was quite flattering.
Oh, good. All right, so you're retired, and you are retired from UCSB Global Studies, which essentially you kind of created.
Right, so I came to UCSB 42 years ago as a sociologist, but over the years I became interested in globalization. Did a lot of work in Santa Barbara initially, and Los Angeles, and then I began to develop an interest in China and other countries. So around 20 years ago we created a program in global and international studies. We now have 1,300 majors. We send a huge number of students to study abroad. I created and chaired for 7 years a master's program which places students in 6-month internships in non-governmental organizations abroad. We now have a doctorate program. So it's been a great trip. But after 42 years I decided basically to ease up a little. I've been recalled as a research professor. I'm teaching a course this quarter, the Introduction to Global Studies course, and I still have grants that fund my research. I still have a MacArthur chair, so I'm still pretty active.
That's amazing creation. It's amazing communication. It's amazing drawing the world together and bringing so many different kinds of people. So much the news goes to other kinds of activities. I find that really amazing. Let's see now. When did you come to Santa Barbara?
Came to Santa Barbara in the fall of 1971. My first impression of Santa Barbara was back in those days they actually turned the streetlights off on State Street at 11 o'clock at night. So I've seen a lot of changes. When I first came here, well, one of the first projects in Santa Barbara I got involved in was something called the Impacts of Growth Study. It was a study done for the City Council in, I think, 72, 73. There were 5 of us on something called, an invention we created called the Santa Barbara Planning Task Force. We bid on a study to figure out how many people should be here. And without going into a lot of detail, we developed 7 different growth scenarios, looked at the impacts of each, and it became a landmark study, which eventually led to city charter amendment with some downzoning, and I think contributed, at least in some small way, to the beautiful city that we have here today. We haven't repeated Orange County. We've really stayed pretty much within our resources. This has been one of the features of Santa Barbara that attracted me here. It's environmentally conscious. It's a relatively small community where anybody can get involved politically and have an impact. And it's just a lovely place to live, really a treasure, I feel. So that early work, other work I did also, there's supposed to be a Bullock's department store put on the corner of State and Victoria. The owners of a popular bookstore at the time, Penny and Terry Davies, brought me and an attorney, Ben Bicel, and we and others basically took on the redevelopment agency and the city council and defeated it. Along the way, we brought one of the Nordstroms in to think about alternatives, and while I can't really say there's a direct connection, the fact that the money was not spent on that project but instead resulted in the Paseo Nuevo, which I think is a pretty good downtown shopping mall, pretty effective. So I was heavily involved in local issues. Also housing and homeless issues, rent control, things of that sort. This was back when I first came here.
You know, I really think the jewel of Santa Barbara is so much represented by the special, very special caring and mentality of the kind of people, maybe like Pearl Chase, who kind of have this larger vision of what is the city, how do we live, what is the possibility. People that really have vision and that positive vision, and I think you're such an incredible example of that. I mean, it isn't everyone that kind of has that larger overview of what can be, and I think you're just such an incredible example of that.
Well, that's very flattering, but I wouldn't put me in a category with Pearl Chase, who really was important. But no, you're absolutely right about the vision. In 1969, the blowout on the Union Oil platform, which was the first environmental catastrophe in the United States, got nationwide attention, and it really launched Santa Barbara in a different direction politically, to be much more environmentally conscious. The first Earth Day was celebrated in Santa Barbara. Out of that came an organization called Get Oil Out, or GOO, and while Pearl Chase represented the kind of sort of philanthropic backbone, a lot of the coastal land was a result of her efforts. The fact that in the city of Santa Barbara especially, all the coastal land is public, Shoreline Park and so forth, rather than developed homes. But the other side, or a related side, were people like Selma Rubin and Paul Rellis, who founded the Community Environmental Council. Selma Rubin, who died a few years ago at the age of 90-something, had been in the forefront of these struggles to preserve Santa Barbara since 1969, and never tired as an activist. So the city has a history of people who have just become engaged. Right. And I will say this also, the engagement has been much more on the environmental side than on the social side. Preserving the beauty of this area has been a high priority. Dealing with issues like homelessness, less of a priority. But on the plus side there, I will say that the City Housing Authority has showcased units for homeless people, for poor people. Santa Barbara's public housing program is second to none. And your program might want to interview, say, Rob Fredericks at the Housing Authority, or Rob Pearson, who's head of the Housing Authority, and take a little tour. We did that last year, and it's pretty impressive what's been done here. It's not enough, but it's definitely something.
I take your recommendation, and I would love to do that. Yeah, I respect that. It's just amazing. Let's see, what else should I ask? Tell me a little bit about your younger history, because I find you a fascinating person and how you kind of emerged to where you got today, making the decisions that you're making.
I was born in a log cabin.
You're right, that's the kind of stuff I want to know, and I know it wasn't a log cabin, but still.
So I was born in Rochester, New York, upstate New York. A cold climate, which at the time I loved. Now I've lost all the survival skills.
Especially what's going on now there.
My parents were artists, really. My father is a classical pianist. My mother is a dancer. They were both teachers, so we had summers as a family. And in the 1950s, incredible as this may sound, my father bought a 25-foot masonite house trailer, had a huge Nash Ambassador, and he took the family on summer trips. 2 to California, 1 to Mexico, Canadian Rockies. And that, I think, instilled in me a love of travel and the out of doors, which I continue to do now on bicycle as opposed to in a car. But my parents were liberal, and so I grew up with that kind of liberal, progressive tradition. I went to Columbia University as an undergraduate, where I majored in public law and government because I wanted to be part of the Kennedy mystique. And then I went to the Woodrow Wilson School at Princeton, which is a 2-year program that prepares you for a career in international affairs, which, by the way, is the inspiration for the Global Studies program here. I brought that with me. And after Princeton, I spent 1.5 years in Lima, Peru, on a Ford Foundation program, consulting to the Peruvian government. And that's annoying, the telephone ringing.
They happen.
And it's undoubtedly an advertising. And then I came back to school and got a PhD at the University of Chicago, finishing in 1971, constantly moving towards California. And so eventually I came to UCSB partly because of the weather, to be honest, partly because of the progressive tradition of the sociology department.
We have fabulous weather, that's for sure.
Right.
Good, good, good. Interesting. You know, another question that I ask some people is, around 14 or so, were there influences in your life or specific decisions that you made that kind of turned you in the right direction? I found with a lot of people that at that age there can be a kind of turning point, and sometimes people make really bad decisions, or sometimes they have mentors, or maybe there's no one at that time. Maybe you were just set on your course and away you went. Do you remember anything around that age that...
Well, all I remember at age 14.
Do you remember that age?
Yeah, what happens to you at age 14? You know, girls. All that
girls,
sort of stuff.
Yes.
So I was fairly straight arrow in high school. You know, I was a top student. I was class president and all that kind of stuff. It wasn't really until later that I became radicalized, as it said in the article.
60s hit. Well.
Right, so it was a couple of things. So one... it was the 60s for sure. He was very active in the anti-war movement in the late 60s. But it was also, well, okay, I'll give you one thing in high school. When I was around 15 or so, I was an exchange student to Mexico. Lived with a family in Mexico City for the summer. That was my first exposure to living in another culture. And that definitely pulled me in that direction. When I went to the Woodrow Wilson School, the summer of 1965, the whole class, my whole class in this graduate program, about 15 or 20 of us, because Princeton had a lot of money, sent us to Central America. And my wife at the time, Diane, and I didn't want to study a business, so we wound up in the Mam-speaking Indian country near Chiapas, Huehuetenango, a little village called San Ildefonso Ixtahuacan. And there I spent the summer with a couple of young men who spoke Spanish as well as a local language, because I spoke Spanish, learning about the lives of the Indians there, which was pretty horrific. They commuted to the plantations to work. They died en route. They were treated like chattel. And that opened my eyes. And then, of course, the time I spent in Peru, working with slum housing, barriadas, working in the highlands and mining towns, interviewing people, also was life-changing. And then coming back to Chicago, 68, 71, which was the height and the center in many ways of activism, really sort of sealed my fate, as it were. So I would say these changes were set down early in my life, but really flourished a little later when I was in my probably mid to late 20s.
Wow. Fascinating. What an exposure. So you have a much broader sense of kind of your being in the world and things like that. And another thing that you probably don't know is that I know or knew Rabbi Leonard Pyramid. And I know that he passed recently, and I know his wife Joni Williams Pyramid, and I know that you had association with him, and I knew him as a dear, dear person, and so you've been involved in real international things.
Right.
A
Well,
lot.
so a word about Leonard. Leonard Pyramid. If Jews had saints, he would be a saint. He is one of my heroes, and he did die recently. Back maybe 20 years ago, I was studying sweatshops in Los Angeles, And so I and a friend from Santa Barbara who's very active in Jewish social action, a woman named Aveli Laser-Schlensky, created the Los Angeles Jewish Commission on Sweatshops. Our reasoning being that Jews had been in the forefront of the garment workers' union at the turn of the century, but now they were some of the leading brands in Los Angeles which were using these sweatshops. So we wanted to sort of pull all this together and do something. Appelbaulm knew Leonard and asked him to co-chair this commission, which he did, which is a pretty radical thing for a rabbi to do. And I just fell in love with the man. His words could move you to tears. He was such a beautiful speaker. And when my daughter got married in Santa Barbara, Sarah, she married someone who is not Jewish, was not a Jewish wedding. Jews don't do the perform, but Leonard agreed to be the rabbi, and he came up and actually performed the ceremony. And my last communication with Leonard was when I retired from UCSB this year. They had a huge shindig for me, and he called me. He said he wasn't well enough to come. I'd invited him, but he wanted to wish me well, and we had a long conversation.
Right.
So, wonderful person, and a real example of what a person can do. Anti-war, pro-peace,
such kindness.
A kind man working with people of other faiths, Christians, Muslims, to build bridges. Really a heroic figure.
Amazing. Yeah, it was such a gift to have known him.
Right.
And very, very special. Yeah. Let's see now. I guess I have to, well, I don't have to, but I might think about, here we are in Santa Barbara, and you've done so much for it. And the other thing, I see you as kind of liaison between really special people, kind of getting them to know each other even. Do you feel there's something being way neglected in Santa Barbara that maybe lots of people ought to look at and kind of go toward, even though I know you're doing things that need to be done? Is there something that lots of people kind of should look at a little more?
Well, I wish that Santa Barbara were as conscious on what I call the social side as the environmental side. I mean, we live in a paradise.
Right.
I mean, we could be on the French Riviera, we could be in the Italian Lake District. I mean, this is a beautiful place, and people preserve it and are concerned. But in terms of dealing with issues of poverty, homelessness, things of that sort, less so. It's not non-existent. There are many people working, and as I mentioned before, the City Housing Authority has done some pretty remarkable things, which I think most people don't know about, which would be good to know about. But generally speaking, I would like to see issues of workers and labor and things like that get more attention. One of the talks that I give is called Making Blue the Next Green. Green being the environment, blue being the sign of labor, workers. And that's really what I've been working on globally, not so much locally.
Interesting.
For the last 10 years or 15 years.
I feel like anything you go toward is going to be lit up.
Well, you know, we have... Might crash and burn also, so...
We have so little time, and we're probably getting to the end of it, and I feel like I could speak with you forever. And I must say, another jewel in your life is probably your wife Karen and your family. And so I think that's wonderful, but I think we have to call it to an end. And I so thank you for making time for us.
Thank you, Bonnie. It's been a pleasure.
Oh,
pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
When you told me you loved me today,
Mike Shipland, cameraman.
And Mike Shipland, cameraman,
yesterday.
It takes the village. Some might even call him family. Thank
Mike
you,
Shipland
thank you.
is family, as you know.
Hi, here we are with Lisa Engel with It Takes a Village. Hi Lisa, how are you doing?
Pretty good.
Good, good. Well, we are really delighted to have you here today, And we know that you have lots of involvement with Santa Barbara. You have a particular interest in the writing community, the television community. And so I would really love to give you a chance to kind of tell us a little bit about your life in Santa Barbara.
Okay, and since I was born here as well, so some people are born here, some people just retire. But
Right.
Some people do both. Well, since I am here on your show that you do at TVSB, I will talk about how I also produce a show for TVSB. It's called Literary Gumbo with host Fred Klein. He was in publishing for 30 years at Bantam Books in New York and retired here to Santa Barbara, did the Book and Author Festival for a while, and with the economy and everything, that petered out. But then he's always at the Santa Barbara Writers Conference, giving consultations, and very brilliant man, knows his publishing business. And so he's our host, and we interview writers, and we talk about writing and the publishing industry and books and all that kind of good stuff. And we've been doing that since 2010. We have about 140 episodes.
That's a lot of episodes. I heard that he was a real whopper in New York.
Yeah.
He knew a lot of people. So then all those connections, he can get real special people on your program.
Yes.
That's neat.
Yeah.
Wow.
And if anybody out there is an author and you want to be on our show, check it out.
Call me.
Yeah. LiteraryGumbo.com.
Okay, great. Let's see. I think you have some other involvements, some other associations in Santa Barbara.
Yes, I am a board member with our local Association for Women in Communications, and that is also a national organization. There's chapters all over the country. A lot of them are in the Midwest, but we have a local chapter here in Santa Barbara. It was started a few years ago, 7, 8 years ago, something like that. Dr. Lois Phillips started our chapter here, and I'm now on the board, and I'm also on the national board. So
wow.
I had to go to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and freeze my little what off.
Wow.
In January we had an in-person meeting. We have to meet in person twice a year. So we come from all over the country. We have to. Our conference is going to be in October in Kansas City. So, but we had some programs here in Santa Barbara. The next one's going to be beginning of March, first Tuesday in March at Antioch University.
Wow.
And it's going to be Women in Public Affairs. And then we're going to have a networking mixer in April on the rooftop at Antioch. Nancy Leffert, who is the president of Antioch University, she was one of our Women of Achievement Award recipients last June. We always have this Women of Achievement Awards that we give out at the beginning of June. We haven't announced this year's winners yet, but we will soon, and it's going to be the first Wednesday in June at the Rockwood Women's Center in.
Oh, that's a nice setting.
Yeah, you've been in Mission Canyon. Yeah. So that's gonna be
this Antioch is the one on Coda Street.
Coda and Anacapa. Yeah, it's right there on the corner.
Okay, great. Wasn't that association founded in the East quite a long time ago?
Yeah, it's like 110 years ago or something like that.
That's amazing.
That. Yeah,
amazing. Huh.
I think even Eleanor Roosevelt was a member at one time.
Wow, that's really something.
But now it's evolved, and we say it's like networking with a soul. Because it's different than going to NABO and some of those other organizations.
I went to one of those meetings, and it was just amazing, the atmosphere, the enthusiasm, the fun, and it was much more relaxed and happy than I thought it would be. It was very encouraging, because I think sometimes when we're writing or we're involved in things, there's very solitary times.
Yes. Yeah.
And so to come to that kind of a meeting, I thought it was really encouraging, and the people were really special. Very nice organization.
Mhm.
Yeah. But I know you're involved with some other things also.
Well, right now what I'm really doing is I'm concentrating on my novel a lot.
Mhm.
You know, when I can, I'm working on my novel,
Mhm.
and I'm going. Let's talk about being a solitary, process.
Mhm.
So I'm going every Saturday afternoon. I go down to Thousand Oaks for a
Mhm.
writing workshop. It's a
Wow.
really intense writing workshop because we work on a chapter during the week. We email it out. Our editor, she'll give us comments, but the other people in the workshop, the 5 other people in the workshop, will give us comments. And we have to do our revision and bring our revision on Saturday for more comments. So
Wow.
that's- yeah. The editor that I'm working with that teaches the workshop, Tony Lopopolo. It's not Hawaiian, it's Italian.
Well, thank you, Lisa, so much. I mean, I know that Tony's a delight. I've heard so much about her, and I think you're so lucky to have the associations that you do have, and I really appreciate you being here, and it takes a village. Hi, I'm Bonnie from It Takes a Village. We're here on Ortega and Santa Barbara Street. What have we discovered? It's a Steve Nipper company. Let's go in and check it out. Hi, Steve. How are you?
Hi, Bonnie. I'm great. Thanks for stopping in today.
All right, what's going on around here?
Well, we're here at Solway, where we make people's water better.
All right. And I'll say that you have a pretty good reputation in this town. How did you earn that?
Well, with 23 years of service to the community and doing a good job and standing behind what we do, that's what we've earned.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah. And I just want to thank you, Bonnie, for helping us support It Takes a Village. We couldn't be happier.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Take care. And so we learned more about Santa Barbara. We have a company that helps the economy of people because of their prices, and they help your good health with good water. Very, very important. Thank you, Steve Nipper at Solway.
Hi, I'm Chris Jensen from Jen's Guitar and Music Company, and I'm proud to sponsor It Takes a Village. And just so you know where we are, here's my card.
I cranked it up and it started telling me, yippee-ki-yo-ki-yay, gone are the days. Right there playing with Jimmy and Tom. Yippee-ki-yo-ki-yay, gone are the days. Living and being with Daddy and Mom. They have the old records from Hoppy and Gene. They've got that country feeling, you know what I mean. Every time